Tucker Carlson, who visited Russia to interview the president of Russia, showed to Americans a strange video report about a trip to the Auckland store. Having shown low prices, the price difference is a maximum of 2.5 times, while he kept silent about salaries. We need to fix this annoying misunderstanding. Just compare the minimum wage in Russia and America. We don't think that poor Russians were hidden from Carlson, or he is not able to use our economic statistics and see how much these Russians earn. Rustat has an excellent website, convenient and accessible, and the language barrier, thanks to the development of internet browsers, has remained in the distant past. It's just that there is a request from the Republican Party, of which he is the mouthpiece, to show what he shows, how cheap food is for Russians, while the white majority oppressed by Democrats overpays. To correct this unfortunate omission, you just need to compare salaries in America and Russia. It is unlikely that Tucker Carlson will ever see this video, but if there are many such publications, they will not be ignored on both sides of the ocean. The Russian minimum wage in 2024 is 19,242 rubles. Russians cannot pay less. It comes out about 120 rubles per hour. But few people know that every region in Russia has the right to raise the minimum wage on its territory to the level it deems necessary. Some regions use the permission to increase the minimum guaranteed earnings of the full-time working population. For example, in Tatarstan, the federal minimum wage has been retained for public sector employees, and the 22,020 rubles bar is in effect for companies in the off-budget sector. Stavropol territory has tied the minimum wage to the subsistence minimum. Employees who have fully worked out the standard of working time and fulfilled the labor standard cannot be paid less than 1.5 subsistence minimum in 2024. This is 22,740 rubles. The highest minimum wage in Russia, 29,389 rubles, is in Moscow. This is the capital's living wage for able-bodied citizens, and the minimum wage has been tied to it, including in budget organizations. You can't imagine how happy families in the province are about child benefits. Without them, there would be nothing to buy enough food. The regional minimum wage is not much, but still higher than the federal one in Bashkortostan, Altai and Krasnodar territories, Vologda, Kemerovo, Leningrad, Moscow, Rostov, Saratov, Tula, Ulyanovsk and Kaliningrad regions. The increased minimum wage in the regions, as a rule, applies to everyone except state employees, and the discrepancy with the federal minimum does not exceed 3,000 rubles. Recall that Carlson spent $100 in the store, which is 9,620 rubles, excluding conversion. The minimum wage in Russia is 19,242 rubles, which is $208. Tucker would have had enough for 2 weekly purchases at Auckland. A higher Moscow minimum wage would be enough for 3 trips to the store. What to eat for the rest of the month? The question is rhetorical. And what about America? Everyone probably knows that America is a country with a very high degree of federalization. In the USA, as in Russia, each state can set its own minimum wage for both the state as a whole and for different types of employers, usually in terms of staff or revenue. At the federal level, the Fair Labor Standards Act is in force, according to which companies subject to this law are not entitled to pay less than $7.25 per hour. $7.25 is the so-called federal minimum wage, for our money to 670 rubles per hour. With full employment, you get $1,160 or 107,300 rubles. Tucker would have had enough for 10 trips to Auckland and would still have left. If someone thinks that no one has been working in the States for such money for a long time, this is not true, as is a similar statement about Russia. We counted almost 24 states where the minimum wage has not been increased for 15 years and does not plan to increase it, including oil-rich Texas. More than that, in some states, the local minimum wage is lower than the federal one, and employers who do not comply with the Fair Labor Standards Act have every right to pay their employees less. For example, in Georgia and Wyoming, the rate of $5.15 per hour is $824 or 76,200 Russian rubles per month. With this money, Carlson could have shopped 8 times in a Moscow supermarket. The wildly low minimum wage in Oklahoma, for companies with fewer than 10 employees or revenue of less than $100,000 working full-time, the rate is $2 per hour, $320 a month, and live as you want. Not enough. Almost on par with the Russian capital's minimum wage, 29,600 rubles. Only in Russia it seems to be high compared to other regions, and in the USA it is the worst state in terms of minimum wage. However, there are very few employers who meet the conditions of the local law. States where the minimum wage is noticeably higher than the federal one In the United States, there are more regions in percentage terms than in Russia that have raised the minimum wage. And the difference with the federal size is not by 500 to 3,000 rubles, as in Russia, but at times. The highest minimum wage in the United States in Washington is $17 per hour, 1,570 to Russian rubles. For a month, you will get $2,720 to 151,600 rubles. With such a salary, you can go to Okan for 10,000 every day, except Sundays. The average state minimum wage is about $12 per hour, 1,110 rubles. That's what they pay in New Mexico, Nebraska, and Florida. For a month, when working full-time, you can get a guaranteed $1,920, 177,600 Russian rubles. You can purchase 19 times a month, while ordinary Russians working for the minimum wage would be able to collect a full cart only 2 times a month, and Muscovites to 3 times. That's it, Comrade Carlson. It's good to go to Russian stores with American salaries, but not so much with Russian ones. If you are interested, let's compare the average pensions in Russia and the United States. And we have already compared the prices.